And it's long line, this changeover. So breaking news, I suppose most people will be aware that new legislation came into force in 2015, or was passed then and came into force proper in April last year. Probably the headlines out of it are that we now have a law requiring us to take care of our employees and staff, which actually, if you looked at the old legislation, said the same thing. And prior to that, we had a 1940s Act around factory workers that said the same thing. So nothing actually too revolutionary in it, but they've upped how they expect us to do that. And amongst it, WorkSafe also says we must take immediate action to manage any known risks. And I've got a couple of examples of court cases later in the piece that will give you some idea how bad New Zealand's been at that in the past and why we need to up our game a bit on it. Obviously the court news that goes with that, and then perhaps 3 questions you could think of as managers that may help you limit the risk your staff face when they go out to do a particular job, and or if you've got a contractor working in your area that you think, what are they doing? I've got a gut feeling that's not quite right, or is it right? So a crucial part of the new legislation, without boring you with law, is section 36 of the Act, which imposes the primary duty of care on us. Now in that primary duty, you have officers, which is the likes of the council for SIT, and Penny at the top of the organisation, because they have that flying at 5,000 feet, if you like, that they're looking down, hoping everyone's doing things correctly and they're reliant that we're doing what we tell them. Versus we're all flying at 500 feet or lower and are involved in a lot more of the doing with the staff on the ground and with the students. So we need to make sure that we fulfil our obligations in relation to that duty to care through what we deliver to the people in their inductions, emergency procedures, etc. So in your handout you'll find there's a copy of the relevant bits of the Act. And as you go through that, the likes of section 36 sets out that you need to look after the staff that you manage. Given that you were clever enough to get to this room today, I presume you know who it is that you're looking after as well. So that one gets a big tick straight away. You also have to think about how what your group does impacts on other groups. So who else is your internal customers? Who else is coming in as far as contractors? And are they safe moving around there? You need to be confident that your staff have safe access egress to work. So in your induction, you need to talk people through how they get into the place, where they go, here's your card, all that real basic stuff. And you start ticking off all the rules on it. Emergency procedures. Again, an induction time's the ideal time, although I've fielded some questions from people that started around the same time me about where to find these things. They're set up online in our HACCP manual, in the QMS. There's details on the A to Z under the staff page as well, with plans as to how your areas evacuate. So we need to start sharing those and use those. Also grabbed a couple of drafts that save having to rely on those manuals, and pass them around if you want. We're actually just trying to get them into some bound booklets that will go up at all the warden stations and be available for tutors, etc., so they can actually brief students a lot easier off a bullet point system versus having to go back to those big documents. The likes of if we have a hazard or an incident that we note on site, do we know how to report those? I know a few of you have because you sent things through, but no, within that staff page again at the bottom right is a incident report and an accident report link that you open up and you simply just type in what's been going on. Very simple fields to follow. That generates an email with an alert through to myself and allows me to coordinate or direct who that has to go to get a correction made. The person that originates that report gets a continuing email updating them as it's assigned through different people. So if I send it to Neil Smith in facilities to correct something, it tells them that it's left my desk, gone to him, and he's now the assigned person to correct it. When he's corrected it and sends it back either to myself to check or your program manager, faculty head, etc. Again, it will update to the person who put it in the system to tell them that it's moved through the system a bit further. So the originator's always kept in the loop. We also need to make sure that people receive sufficient instruction support to complete their jobs. So that's just basic day-to-day stuff that you're introducing them, make sure they've got the skills, they know how systems work, rather than trying to find out themselves. Something that comes up in risk management is that your risk is multiplied several times when you get uncertainties. Anyone here made a mistake before? Because that's where it all comes from, is if you've got uncertainty, people will assume what they think is the right thing to do for you. I do it every weekend and get in trouble with Leanne. She looks at me thinking, where have you got to with that? So yeah, you need to be just specific what you want people to do and make sure they understand those basics. And then you've got to maintain some systems that control certain things such as chemicals, etc. So the likes of at the moment on site, working through with the chemistry lab and biology to ensure we've got everything up to date with our safety data sheets, etc. And that we're stored properly. At some stage I'm going to come down and annoy you downtown as well. On the left here, sounds like something out of the movies, but that's the pyramid of danger. It's actually also known as the Bird's pyramid and Heinrich's pyramid. And it's evolved out of studies in the 30s and later in the 70s, saying that for every 30,000 unsafe behaviours we had, they found that we had 3,000 unaccomplished incidents, 300 recordable injuries, 30 serious injuries, and then 1 death. They just simply said that. They didn't draw any conclusions out of it. But unfortunately, in health and safety teachings, they took all those figures and said, well, that must mean that if we clean out the stuff at the bottom, the things at the top won't happen. And that's where behavioural safety's evolved from. And you have all this stuff about having to hold handrails when you walk up and down stairs, etc. What shoes do you wear? Versus, well, they're things that like DuPont have put into their industries, but they still blow up or kill 6 people a year. So they've suddenly gone, well, hold on. This stuff down here isn't sorting the stuff above the line as much as we thought. And there's a wee change in how we deal with risk, and as well as trying to promote those safe behaviours, we're also looking at things called critical risk management. So those are incidents where if one key thing goes wrong, someone ends up dead. For us, things will be like traffic and transport. We've got people coming in and dealing with the forklifts unloading things. Get hit one of those, real risk of serious injury or death. We've got people travelling the country in cars. What's our different levels of experience in driving a vehicle and being safe on the road? So there's some things there for critical risk management as well that we need to look at. In controlling those, again, on the right is an inverted pyramid in respect of the controls you put in place to keep safe. We're very good at writing procedures, what people should do. You can see the work practices below the line. You need 7 of those below the lines complied with 100% to actually equal a similar level of safety of the 3 things above, being engineering controls, substitution or elimination. Because people won't follow them 100%, people won't do everything correct every single time, so they just don't work on their own. So yeah, as far as where SIT's heading now, and with yourselves, we need to find that balance between just going along with the general hazards of loose carpet and fixing those, but also making sure we have no critical risks arising in your areas that can cause serious injury or death. Does that make sense? Give you some ideas of how that impacts out there in the world of court cases. Budget plastics is an incident that occurred within the new legislation, so it's the first one that's been prosecuted and sentenced under the new Act. And I thought I had a bit more detail there, sorry. They are based in Palmerston North. They had a machine that all the plastic, small bits of plastic were tipped into, it gets melted down and goes away for injection and moulding. In 2014, WorkSafe put out clear direction on how those machines should be configured. They actually gave plans out to the industry as to how they should be designed with guards, etc. And they also put out a big booklet to the industry in general saying that all emergency stops need to be within 2 metres of where a person works. Because if you get trapped, how do you reach it? If it's further than 2 metres away, you're never going to reach it with one of your limbs to activate it. End of last year, this company had a person get caught at the point of tipping the plastic granules in. There was no e-stop there. They had their hand amputated, and when they come and look at the machine, it hadn't been updated with what was given to them in 2014. Comes back to, we have a responsibility to deal with the risks that we see, and we deal with them now rather than leaving things. They were fined, under the new legislation, they looked at fining them $200,000, which, if you look at that for us, and our margins operating at less than 10% on what we're turning over, you know, we're looking at having to, if we ever ended up in a prosecution like that, we're looking at having to make $2 million back somewhere else before we've got any money to run a course. So the risk to us sustainably is huge. Sullivan Packaging, again, company that had a worker working in a machine. An unlocked plastic metal plate collapsed on him while he was working on it. It was somewhere around 80 kilos on his chest. He was trapped in there. He died the next day from a heart attack. They established that he hadn't followed a safe working system. There was actually, about 3 years before that, a person had a part of their body trapped in it. They put safety interlocks in place. They were a nuisance to production. The people overrode them. The supervisor knew they'd overridden them, so the equivalent of manager. But because they were more focused on time management and the production, they left it that way. The result was this guy got trapped when he came along and worked in there. So again, they knew the risk, it had been identified, they'd actually had a fix, and people being people, they'd gone around it. Metro Fire, again, fined $60,000 or to pay reparation of $194,000 when a worker fell 3 metres from a ladder that they'd put on top of a scaffold. So they were above the handrails and everything by doing that. And the worker's now tetraplegic. Now what happened out of that was that they were there to move some fire alarms and monitoring systems. The boss had installed them, so he thought he knew the environment. He said, they've got scaffold there, just use it, it's all good. Staff went there, saw what kit was there and thought, well, that's what we've got to make do with, because the boss said. It turned out in between, there'd been renovations and the whole level of the floor had changed, and the supervisor was out of sync with what the actual environment was, and he'd put the staff wrong. Austin Brothers was one down here. Don't know if you know them, they're based out at Riversdale, and they were working on a farm doing a grain silo. They failed to lock their power out to the machinery. They went in and worked on top of the grain. The truck turned up to get filled with the grain. The farmer come along, turned the equipment on. The person working inside ended up engulfed in the grain. They had to perform CPR to bring them back round, and luckily they lived. But you've got a situation here, probably to relate it to ourselves, is a bit like Rob has contractors coming in to work on the houses, etc. shared responsibility as to who's going to look after what. So in this, there should have been a discussion. We're going to lock this out. What are you going to do with the farmer side of things if the truck turns up? I'm going to tell him he can't load up. I'm going to tell the truck to come on another day. None of those discussions occurred. Person nearly dead out of it. And it actually turned out the people trying to rescue him ended up in hospital as well for 4 days. And then Hydrotech at the bottom, again, another situation working on site. Should have had some traffic management in place to keep the public away from where they were with the excavator. They didn't put anything up. Person got hit. Just real simple stuff when you look at it afterwards. So for yourselves, if you're dealing with contractors coming in and working your area, because according to the procedure it says whoever's in charge of that area should be getting a copy of the risk assessment from those people. Also, if you've got your people doing any tasks that involves working at heights or similar, you need to be saying to them, when you do your work, what hazards do you encounter that could hurt you, that could seriously injure you or kill you? You then need to have the discussion with them. Second question, once they've identified those things, when that happens, rather than if, when that happens, because it's one day it'll happen. A number of times I've had people say, I've worked here 20 years, nothing's happened. The next week, that's when the person gets caught in that machine. So it's when that happens, and because we're not perfect and our processes aren't perfect, what's going to keep you safe? And that's when you know if your people know your procedures and your way of doing these, because the likes of the electricians will say to you, we isolate, we turn the power off. We've got our tools that are insulated so we don't get a shock. We've got our work procedures, and all those things keep me safe in combination. And then your third question at the end of it's going to be, is that enough? And if they say yes, those things are enough, and I feel safe to work, you've gone a long way to fulfilling your obligation as a manager, because you've actually bothered asking, you've gone through those key questions that deal with the things on the top of that triangle that are going to seriously hurt them or kill them. So for SIT at the moment, in the background there's a secondary group out of council that are looking to set some objectives and goals around health and safety for the organisation. I'd also like to be submitting something back up from staff and the health and safety reps as to what we think could be our goals and objectives for them to consider, so that we actually own them a bit. These are some ideas I have around that, but I'd be very interested on some feedback from people relevant to their areas, whether that be now or by email, so that we're actually making something that works for us, rather than being told. So feel free to share that. And as an example, that's just off the internet, some simple golden rules that a lot of organisations have out there, that this is how we're going to do things. And people stand by, so that you don't have to worry about reading procedures all the time. Just highlights how to keep yourself safe. Any questions?
Dave, when I was it was quite good. I went onto the A to Z web links and went onto one of the reporting things. It mentions an FAI and an MTC.
Yep.
And it was something to do with the degree of
FAI is first aid injury.
Okay.
MTC is medical treatment. So if you get an MTC, fits in with getting an ACC form, basically. And then it doesn't have that within that system, but generally out there in the world they talk about LTIs as well, which is lost time injuries, which is once you're actually injured and not able to come to work anymore as well.
Oh, you mean?
Yep.
We had that issue recently in engineering, the welding of the grinding went on. So that's the process for all students. It's just so everyone's clear. So all students, if they have an injury or something in the classroom or the classroom environment, they go directly to the nurse, and the nurse raises all the internal. Or
Depends upon the area. At the moment, Everywhere except for hairdressing is doing that. Hairdressing's got their own book that they're recording that too. The real minor stuff, because they get a few wee nicks and cuts, and traditionally we used to do that in hospitality as well, and we may well go back that way on the basis that people in the likes of that hospitality, people are reporting small cuts from the use of knives when they first week or two of using them. That if you look at that bird model, that capturing that information and having a nurse tied up and putting that into the computer isn't actually giving us anything productive at the other end. It's not telling us anything because we can't eliminate it by taking the knives off people and expect them to get a job at the end. We can't substitute them. We can't substitute them to a plastic knife. And we can't engineer a cover over the knife because we need the blade to cut things. So we've pretty much just got to keep on teaching and teaching and teaching. And if we've got people that's skills are particularly poor, well, it becomes a stage as to whether they're meeting the grade in their assessment in it versus continually putting it on the computer and statistically trying to stop it.
Well, it's been certainly, I know coming in and impressing, just, there's so much that managerial kind of stuff that you need to know, and I think having aspects of training, ongoing training, and finding out where to find things, even on our systems, and then taking that information as managers and making sure our staff know, it's that sharing the workload and sharing the responsibility. So it's been some really interesting, good new learning for me in terms of where to find stuff for start. So thank you very much, Dave, for coming and giving up your time, and I know that you are really open to discussions about health and safety, and that you're really approachable with any of those kind of questions. And no, my interactions with you, I found that no question is a silly question, and it's better to ask than be in the dark. So thank you, Dave. Round of applause for Dave.
Cheers.